So how do we graph when we stick in extra numbers? Well, here's what you might call a vertical stretch. It's not an amplitude because it doesn't oscillate between high and low, but what we can do is say, well, this key point here and this key point here gets stretched by 3. So this 1 goes to 3, and this -1 goes to -3. Still goes through the origin, and the vertical asymptotes don't change. And so that 3 stretches the graph, and all you have to do is stretch those points at 1 and -1 at 45 degrees, or pi/4. This is the easy one. If we add something at the end, we take our dashed tangent parent graph and just take the middle, move it up 3, take these middle points, move them up 3, and you have your same tangent graph that we had before, but we move the 3 points up by 3, and that's the easiest thing in the world, isn't it? Here's our horizontal shift. Again, the formula has subtraction in it, so this is really minus a -pi/4. So this graph moves to the left pi/4. So here's our y-axis. I'm going to move the middle over pi/4. That means I move this vertical asymptote over pi/4 and this vertical asymptote over pi/4. See, it's off-centered a bit. And so if this is to the left pi/4, and I go another pi/4, that's pi/2, another pi/4, that's 3 pi/4. To the right, that's 0, to the right again, pi/4. 2 pi/4, 3 pi/4, 4 pi/4, 5 pi/4. If you can count 1 by 1 by 1, you can get all the numbers in between. The 1s and -1s don't change. You just shift it to the left pi/4. We saw for tangent, the normal period is pi, not 2 pi, pi. So we have our change of our period, we divide by b, it'll be pi over b, not 2 pi, and in this case it's 3. So what we have to do is think, okay, if this is the middle, and this is pi/3, half of pi/3 is pi/6 to the left and right, and half of pi/6 is pi/12 left and right. So it's just a little bit of fractions. Half of is 1/2 times. So 1/2 pi/3, which is the period, is pi/6 to the left and to the right, and 1/2 of pi/6 is pi/12 in between. So 1 pi/12, 2 pi/12, 3 pi/12, 4 pi/12, 5 pi/12, 6 pi/12. And 6/12 is pi/2. Again, just a little bit of fractions, but they're easy fractions. You need to identify the 1 and -1 points, the in-between points, as well as those x values counting out pi/12s. Okay, so for example 6, we're going to put it together, as it says here. And so here's my suggestion. Make a rough sketch on the side, like scratch. We know we have an asymptote here, and an asymptote here, and a curve like this, because we're talking about tangent. And we have a middle point here, a middle point here, a point up at usually 1, and a point down at usually -1. That would change if there was a number in front, which there isn't, but we are going to flip the graph in a moment. So let's gather information. The vertical stretch, actually, there isn't one, so it's 1, multiplying by 1. I know it's negative, but we'll do that in a moment. The period, factoring out the 2, clearly 2 times x is 2x. How do we come up with this spot? Let's see if this works for you. 2 times that spot has to be pi over 2. So if you multiply both sides by a half, I could divide by 2, but isn't it the same thing as multiplying by a half? And so that spot is going to be pi over 4, which is what I have here. And so our horizontal shift is to the left, pi over 4. We factor the 2 out. Our period is pi over b, or pi over 2. And the midline goes down 1 to y equals negative 1. Now, let's start with the period. The period is pi over 2. So half of pi over 2 is pi over 4. So typically, it's going to go to the right pi over 4 and the left pi over 4, and that'll give us a period of pi over 2. I need these half points. Well, half of pi over 4 is pi over 8, right? 1/2 times pi over 4 is pi over 8. And this one, of course, is negative pi over 8. So we have some numbers to work with, don't we? Now, if we shift that to the left, pi over 4, this pi over 4 becomes pi over 2. This 0 becomes negative pi over 4, and this pi over 4 shifted to the left is 0. And halfway between 0 and negative pi over 4 is negative pi over 8, negative 1 pi over 8, negative 2 pi over 8, negative 3 pi over 8, negative 4 pi over 8. So we've now shifted our graph over and we've labeled our x-axis. Our midline goes down 1, so this middle point now ends up here. And then we just have to flip it. Normally it goes this way, but because of the negative, it's got to go the other way. So at this halfway point from the middle, it's going to go up 1, and from the middle, it's going to go to the right, down 1, because my scale is going to be 2 boxes for 1. So down 1 is 2 boxes. And there we go. Domain, I have to jump over all of the vertical asymptotes. So then one vertical asymptote is, let's say, at 0, and actually I have to correct this. So it's 0 plus, and how far away is the next asymptote? Well, it's 1 period, pi over 2. So it's 0, if you wish, plus pi over 2k, where k is an integer, but nobody cares about adding 0, so I can just do that. So all the x values in the real numbers, as long as it's not on the asymptote. And up and down the range goes forever down, forever up.